Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Marvel's Loki Season 1, Episode 4, The Nexus Event. So ahead of Loki Season 2, we are doing a Loki Season 1 rewatch, because we were able to find even more details and Easter eggs, and we need to check it out with a fresh perspective and figure out where I can adopt my very own adorable little Loki gator. The Season 2 premiere of Loki is days away, but don't worry, we're going to continue this rewatch series in between Episodes 1 and 2 of Season 2, because I think the Loki fandom needs to be reawakened before they care enough to rewatch this. But don't worry, we're going to get to all of it. But this episode is especially important to revisit because for episode 4, we just finally saw a deleted scene in recent days from this episode, and there is a crazy detail that connects this episode to the next MCU film. Okay, we open this episode back on Asgard, shown from an angle that we haven't seen before because the camera swoops up from over the mountains as this haunting music plays. So in the Thor films, Asgard is always shown from the Bifrost Bridge in the front, but here we see the back door of the palace because this is Sylvie's timeline, and her beautifully serene home stands in stark contrast to the chaotic apocalyptic events she's been hiding out in. But here, she's still just a kid, played by Callie Fleming, who is Judith from The Walking Dead, and she plays with toys.
Dragon swoops towards the palace, but Valkyrie flies over, defeats the dragon, and saves Asgard.
Yes, we see Valkyrie on a Pegasus. Thor admitted Valkyrie was also his fan crush, so of course this would be the toy that she would most admire. We see a dragon, a Viking longboat, another one in the back over by the seat, and a large wooden wolf, maybe Fenris, whom we saw at Hela's side in Thor Ragnarok. But TVA Minutemen show up and arrest Sylvie. They are led by then Hunter Renslayer in her A23 helmet, which we mentioned before when it appeared at the end of episode 2 is a reference to Avengers 23 from 1965, the first iconic appearance of Ravonna Renslayer, and at the time, a huge detail that Kang or a Kang variant was behind all of this. But also notice that they enter from a door that they create behind Sylvie, which would explain why she told Loki that she never sits with her back to a door. This moment was really the start of all her traumatic events in her life. There's no real explanation for her arrest, other than it's just for crimes against the sacred timeline that she'll commit at some point in her destined future. But I like to assume that He Who Remains has been controlling Sylvie's life from the beginning so that she will one day end up at his citadel. This is really the first Nexus moment to set her on the path that he wanted for her. And I think what feels particularly cruel is the way this reset charge erases her toys even. That is so mean. Sylvie is brought into the TVA and goes through the same process that Loki went through as an adult. It was scary and intimidating even for that grown-up. So we really feel her fear in everything that she's experiencing. She sees another variant who shouts "No!" as his arm is twisted behind him, and Sylvie yells out for someone to help him. This is a stark contrast to adult Sylvie pruning and murdering anyone who gets in her way. As a kid, unlike adult Loki, she cares about other people. She clearly was not evil. She goes into the transcript room, and the guy doesn't yet have his cat or his cat mug. Sylvie's transcript of everything that she's ever said is significantly thinner than Loki's was. She has her temporal aura scanned and winces as it takes her photo with a flash and a loud noise. Sylvie's brought before a judge, but she stomps on Renslayer's boot and steals her temp pad to get out of there. She not only realized what the temp pad was, but also figured out how to use it immediately, so she's obviously an extremely bright kid. Remember last episode, she told Loki that unlike him, she taught herself magic. And this episode makes it clear that she has been evading the TVA for years, since she was just a kid. And remember, Asgardians, and we think Frost Giants, age a lot slower. So like generations, eons upon eons. And maybe the reason He Who Remains chose this variant was because she's even more resourceful than all the other Lokis. She was also young enough when she was taken to remember the warm, safe home that she lost. And I think that makes her dangerous. Okay, so we cut to the present day, and actually this whole thing was really Renslayer's memory. This is guilt that she has been carrying with her. She's kind of like Reginald Vell Johnson in Die Hard, always haunted by the time when she shot a kid. She walks out of the elevator doors to see the Timekeepers, who are really just smoke and mirrors, we learn at the end of this episode. There is literal smoke here, like when Dorothy meets the Grand Wizard of Oz. And behind them is a glowing red symbol that kind of looks like the runes Agatha and Wanda used to mark a magical boundary and prevent others from casting spells. Maybe this is how they keep people from using magic inside the TVA. The way that they're dressed and the way that they're displayed like that on the wall is definitely a nod to the three most important people in the world in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. They were the futuristic council who kept the timeline on track and were played by real-life musicians Clarence Clements, Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band, Martha Davis, lead singer of the Motels, and Fee Waybill, lead singer of the Tubes. The Timekeepers are just more ridiculous theater from He Who Remains and his desire to entertain himself. Renslayer says,
"Do you have any idea how impossible it is to keep the timeline stable? The Timekeepers are all that stand between us and full-scale calamity.
Yes, this is more TVA propaganda, like the posters and the Miss Minutes video, designed to keep everyone compliant in their mundane busy work tasks. On Lamentis 1, Sylvie tells Loki about the events we saw in the first scene, and that it took her a long time to figure out how to hide from the TVA.
And so that's where I grew up, the ends of 1,000 worlds. Now, that's where I'll die.
Mobius and a still shaken looking Hunter B-15 search through Apocalyptic Events for Loki and Sylvie, and that chronomonitor screen shows Wrightsville, Pennsylvania, January 6, 1832, something about January 6s, but that was actually the year a bridge over a river collapsed due to ice and flooding. Next to that is Morag, that's the planet where Peter Quill recovered the orb containing the Power Stone in Guardians of the Galaxy. Morag was actually home to an advanced civilization that was wiped out by global warming catastrophe, and that originally for Guardians of the Galaxy, Peter Quill was actually going to go scuba diving, and that was going to be what they had to do in Avengers Endgame when they revisited Morag, like an earlier time when it was still underwater. At the time Peter Quill visits it at the beginning of Guardians, the water's at low tide and sky's are up, and that's why he had to go after the orb at that particular window of time. Sakaar is also on the screen, remember the trash planet from Ragnarok, and we also saw this on the screen at the end of episode 2. Also Alberta, Canada, considered one of the riskier provinces to live due to the frequent floods and wildfires. It's also the birthplace of Wolverine! Later in the scene, when they spot the Lamentis 1 branch timeline, the screen also shows unidentified planet, then Barcelona, which we saw on the screen back in episode 2, and then Aladna, a new detail we very recently spotted in a different video on New Rockstars, but this is a planet we're going to be visiting in the upcoming film, The Marvels. This is where Carol Danvers has a husband in Prince Yan. It's a planet where everyone speaks in rhymed music lyrics, but rumor has it they might have trimmed that subplot down in post-production. Also on the screen we see Lima, Peru. We get this awesome point of view shot from the planet as it gets closer and closer to Lamentis 1, breaking apart and hurling chunks of debris everywhere before we cut to Loki and Sylvie serenely sitting in the midst of that devastation, having accepted their fates. Sylvie asks,
Do you think that what makes a Loki is the fact that we're destined to lose?
We may lose. Sometimes painfully, but we don't die. We survive.
There's this idea of destiny versus choice. How much of this is being written by He Who Remains? We also see the truth in Loki's statement at the end of this episode when it is revealed that a whole bunch of Loki variants thought dead actually survived in the void. But Sylvie's fear is also a lingering one that Loki has struggled with. In Avengers, a dying Coulson told Loki,
You're going to lose. It's in your nature. You lack conviction.
In fact, throughout the MCU, we've seen Loki both lose and seemingly die, only to survive many, many times. Sylvie and Loki hold hands, causing a huge branch in the timeline, the titular Nexus Event, which allows the TVA to get a temporal lock on them and swoop in at the last second before they're obliterated. So once again, the Lokis don't die, they survive. But if the edit back to the TVA happens abruptly in this episode, it's actually because there was a deleted scene from this moment that just came out in the past week. Take a look.
What happened on this moon?
I did what you asked me to do. My way, perhaps. Unconventional, more sophisticated. Not quite the TVA way, but I did it. And now you have her. That's what happened. I'm not your enemy.
I am.
Rest them both. Mobius, you have to trust me.
I don't.
Prune it. And get them back.
But in the final cut, I like that we don't see Loki hold Sylvie hostage like this because it kinda undercuts the honest connection that the two had just had. These two here share one last meaningful glance before they're separated, and Mobius brings Loki to the Time Theater 25 and sends him through a door similar to the ones the TVA used for time travel, except it's red instead of that orangey yellow. Red, the same color as that rune down in the Timekeeper chamber. Maybe there's some kind of connection there, as that's something that kind of controls the barrier of how magic can be used in the TVA. Now, longtime New Rockstars viewers know how much we use geology and how long we've been using it for, but if this is your first time hearing about geology, get ready for blockbuster quality skincare on a student film budget. Geology is a 23-time award-winning skin, hair, and body care company recognized in Men's Health, Oprah Daily, Hypebeast, Birdie, Esquire, and GQ. Geology's products are just a handful of powerful, proven ingredients that have been trusted by dermatologists for decades. Geology can help you fight acne, reduce oiliness, prevent wrinkles, combat dark or puffy under eyes, have smoother, hydrated skin, and target signs of aging. Geology. Everything you need to keep your skin healthy, no matter how much you soak in the pool this summer. Don't know where to start? Geology can create a simple and effective skincare or hair care routine for you. All you gotta do is take a quick 30-second quiz. Right now, if you use the code NewRockstars100, Geology will give you 100% off their award-winning skincare trial set. You'll also get an additional bonus offer of up to 30% off one skin, hair, or body products when you add it to your trial. It's truly a wild offer, one of the best they've ever given our audience. So click the link in the description or go to geolog.ie/rockstars100 to get started. Loki quickly discovers that he is in a time cell, a sort of prison that loops a memory over and over and over again. Kind of feels like something out of an episode of Black Mirror. Jamie Alexander returns as Lady Sif.
You,
Sif!
you conniving, craven, pathetic worm. You did this!
What?
I hope you know you deserve to be alone, and you always will be.
At this point, Jamie Alexander had last been seen in the MCU in Thor: The Dark World, since the actress had been filming the TV show Blind Spot during Ragnarok. Now, she did appear in 2 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and post-Loki, she shows up in Thor: Love and Thunder, where she lost an arm and then trains some Asgardian children in the ways of combat. Loki cutting Sif's hair is actually from Norse mythology, in which Loki cut off Sif's hair as a prank, and to make up for it, had the dwarves, the sons of Ivaldi, make a headpiece out of gold to replace Sif's hair. In that version, Sif is Thor's wife, and since she was very proud of her hair, Thor was understandably pissed at his brother. Adopted. The sound mix in this scene is just so good. Like, each time the loop restarts, you can hear this reset noise.
Because it was just a bit of fun.
You.
And each time Sif punches him, the punch gets louder on each pass to convey the pain level that Loki is experiencing. In episode 1, Hunter B-15 smacked him in the face with a reset stick.
You're now moving at 1/16 speed, but feeling all that pain in real time.
Which is just another example of manipulating time, stretching it out to punish it to make sure people feel every nerve-ending firing. This whole experience has been like a purgatory for Loki, with him feeling pain over and over again until he's ready to grow and move on. Sylvie, meanwhile, is in Time Theater number 47, which could be a nod to Marvel What If number 47, titled What If Loki Found Thor's Hammer First, in which Loki takes Thor's hammer. Could be a bit of foreshadowing for the post-credits scene, in which we will see one of the Loki variants holding a variation of Mjolnir. Mobius tells Hunter B-15,
you know, we brought in Kree, Titans, vampires. Why is it the 2 orphan demigods are such a pain in the ass?
Kree we have seen before, most notably in Captain Marvel. Titans obviously refers to the people of Titan, Thanos' home world, but the mention of vampires lays the groundwork for Blade, which is supposed to be released sometime during Phase 5, but has had several delays. But it's just interesting that the TVA has brought in both Kree and Titans, because I'm pretty sure we saw those 2 warring races in the Miss Minutes animation video in episode 1. But the scene with Loki and Mobius in the interrogation room is just so good. The acting is perfect, but also take a look at the lighting throughout. The overhead lights shift downward, so this room may be part of one of those spires that we saw in the TVA exterior that rotates past whatever the outside light source is. Loki tells Mobius that he and all the TVA employees are variants.
So before this, you had a past. Maybe you had a family, a life. Nice try.
The camera stays on Owen Wilson the whole time for this, and he's got these brilliant, subtle reactions on his face. He has at least expected this as a case, but he's not ready to admit it to himself. Mobius considers it for a moment, but then the light of truth shines on his shoulders, and then he leans back forward into the shadow to signify him blocking that notion out of his mind. But then, as Mobius says he and Loki's interests are no longer aligned, the overhead lights shift back upward, and as Loki says he's lying to himself, the light behind Mobius shrinks back down. This scene is just a really cool example of how all the different elements of the show come together so well. Mobius says to Loki that Loki doesn't really do partners unless it benefits him, and he intends to betray them. And Loki responds that, quote, it was a means to an end. This exchange is likely about Loki working for Thanos, and it confirms that he was only doing that as part of his own larger agenda. In Renslayer's office, she listens to more theremin music. This This is Le Cygne, or The Swan, by composer Camille Sanson, played here again by Clara Rockmore, who also performed the Tchaikovsky song that we heard back in episode 2. Loki director Kate Herron features theremin music throughout the series, and that's because she actually played Rockmore's rendition in her pitch to direct this series. Renslayer signs Loki's execution order using the same FDR high school pen that Mobius noticed in episode 2, and note how he looks down at it again here. That pen and its meaning will pay off in the final episode of the series. Here, Renslayer tells him,
You've seen all of existence, same as me, so you know. Friendship like ours is uncommon and worth fighting for.
This is pure manipulation by her, because later on she orders him pruned without much of a second thought. It's manipulation on a smaller scale than He Who Remains, who puppets multiple people in timelines. We're still not entirely sure by the end of season 1 how much Renslayer knows about everything, including her own past, but hopefully we'll get those answers in season 2. B-15 is clearly still affected by Sylvie having been inside her mind, and she stares at this poster which reads, "Did you get them all? Verify through deletion." It has this big brothery mustached man whom we've seen in the credits, and I don't know how anyone could pass by this creepy propaganda poster every day and still think they were the good guys. She brings Sylvie back to the Rockstars site, and Sylvie reconstructs her memory.
I looked happy.
I love the decision to not let the audience see what B-15 is seeing, but instead to just focus on her reaction as tears mixed with the rain. It's kind of a nod to the famous "Tears in Rain" monologue from Blade Runner, a major inspiration for Loki, cited in WandaVision with the Tannhauser Gate sign. The implication behind her saying "I looked happy" is of course that she hasn't been happy at the TVA, which means that maybe all agents could sense that there was something wrong with this reality of theirs. I've mentioned Severance before in terms of the parallels to Loki, and this moment reminds me of when Yul Vasquez tells Adam Scott's character that even when he couldn't remember who he was or why he was sad, the sadness was still there. B-15 asks,
What now?
I love that there's a thunder crack right after she asks this, because there's a storm coming for the TVA, baby, and she knows it. Mobius confirms from Renslayer's stolen tempad that she pruned C-20 to cover up the truth, and you can see 3 dates: 11/8/1537, 7/13/1974, and 3/15/2050. The last one is when the Rockstars disaster took place, which is interesting because March is not supposed to be hurricane season in the Gulf Coast, but you know what? We don't have category 8 and 9 hurricanes either in the Gulf Coast, so 2050 is just gonna be all sorts of messed up. 1537, I assume, is that spot in France that we saw in episode 1. We know C-20 was at the 1985 Oshkosh Ren Fair. 1974 must have been some other incident that they visited. Mobius tells Loki that he was right about the TVA from the beginning, and before they go off to take it down, he says,
You can be whoever, whatever you want to be, even someone good. I mean, just in case anyone ever told you different.
Loki takes it and grins because this probably is the first time someone told him that, and he actually was in a place to really hear it and believe it. But then Renslayer has Mobius pruned, Loki's first real true friend, and you see that pain all over Loki's face. As Renslayer leads Loki and Sylvie into the elevator of the Timekeepers, everything has this golden yellow glow, reminding us of the golden yellow brick road of the Wizard of Oz, maybe? Sylvie and Renslayer have this exchange.
What was my Nexus event?
I don't remember.
Oof, just brutal. Kind of reminds me of Don Draper and that amazing meme in Mad Men that like I want to tweet at people who yell at me.
I feel bad for you.
I don't think about you at all.
And that little smile from Renslayer really rubs salt in the wound at the idea that Sylvie's warm, safe home with her toys and people who loved her were all ripped away by someone who didn't even care enough to have it leave a lasting impression. So we all meet the Timekeepers, and all 3 are actually voiced by Jonathan Majors.
After all your struggle, at last you've arrived before us.
What do you have to say for yourself before you meet your end? You and your brother are no friend to us.
As Sylvie and Loki fight the Hunters, you can see that the Timekeeper chamber is designed with all these stairways going to nowhere, looking like MC Escher's relativity lithograph. And once again, like when she was little, Sylvie gets one over on Renslayer, knocking her out and beheading the center Timekeeper, and the other 2 laugh creepily before shutting down in even creepier fashion, like malfunctioning Disneyland robots. The Timekeepers are revealed for what they are, one of Sam Wilson's big 3, that he's old Bucky, were always the villains causing them trouble.
The big 3.
What big 3?
Androids, aliens, and wizards.
But we get the creepiest creep of all. If you listen closely, you hear the words, "See you soon," being whispered. Exactly what He Remains' final words will be to Sylvie after she kills him.
See you soon.
Loki gets up the courage to profess his love to Sylvie, but before he can, Renslayer prunes him through the back, just like the way he stabbed Coulson in the back. His face is the last thing to disappear, similar to how Vision disappeared in WandaVision, and Brenda Lee's If You Love Me, Really Love Me plays over the credits, and we hear the lyrics. When at last our life on Earth is through, I will share eternity with you. If you love me, really love me, let it happen, I won't care. Echoing the fact that these Loki variants have loved even through the end of A World and an apocalypse. There is a new photograph during the credits if you look closely, Sylvie as a young girl, and we get our first post-credit scene of Loki. Loki wakes up in the void and he asks,
"Is it hell?"
He's referring to hell with one L, which is the afterlife from Norse mythology, where we got the Christian notion of H-E-L-L. But he hears this voice.
Not yet. But you will be unless you come with us.
And he sees these 3 Loki variants standing over him, like the shot of the Avengers when they were standing over him to arrest him in the 2012 film. Here we get Richard E. Grant as classic Loki, wearing the Jack Kirby yellow and green 1962 comics outfit, Kid Loki, who played a part in the Young Avengers comics, Alligator Loki, who might be a nod to Throg or a Thor Frog variant from the comics who we'll meet in episode 5, and Boastful Loki, wielding a hammer similar to Mjolnir, but his hammer actually looks fashioned from a wrench handle and a piece of a railroad track. They are in what looks like the ruins of New York City, or at least pieces of New York City that have been pruned here to the void, with a crumbling Avengers tower in the background. This is a slightly different tower than the one that we saw in 2012, because notice it doesn't yet have the Quinjet landing pad, which got added in the events of Avengers Age of Ultron. We will actually see in episode 5 that this is actually Kang Tower, Q-E-N-G, a tower linked to Kang Enterprises of Mr. Griffin, one of the Kang variants that we actually see, I think, in the Quantumania mid-credits scene. Actually, the song that we hear here is Alan Silvestri's Avengers score, I'll Take That Drink Now, which is what Loki said after they caught him.
I'll have that drink now.
Okay, our re-breakdown of episode 5, Journey into Mystery, is coming next, and we went deep into this void to find even more great stuff, including who we spotted before, Throg, but we're gonna talk a lot about him because another deleted scene was just revealed in previs form, showing Throg and the voice work that Chris Hemsworth did for him. So be sure to check out our episode 5 re-breakdown when it drops. You can follow me at EA Voss, follow New Rockstars, and subscribe to New Rockstars and all 3 of our channels on the New Rockstars network for breakdowns of everything you love. Thanks for watching, bye.